Hello and welcome to this first revision video for Living Under Nazi Rule, which is going to cover chapter 1 of this course, all about how the Nazis achieved total power in Germany. Now, you might remember we've used a kind of analogy of a road from democracy, where Germany was in January 1933, to a dictatorship, which the Nazis had established a year and a bit later by July 1934. And the idea of the road is that over these 18 months or so, there's a number of important points which help the Nazis get closer to that destination of a dictatorship. So some of the things we'll be revising in this video are things like the Reichstag Fire, one of the important stops on this journey, the Enabling Act. We have the banning of political parties. We have things like the Night of the Long Knives. And all of these things are important points along this road up to the point where Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party have created a total dictatorship, have complete control over Germany by July 1934. So we have a few important points to recap in this video. We're going to be 8 points overall to help us answer how the Nazis achieved total power. Some of the things we look at here will be things you feel really confident on. For bits which you're not so sure about, make sure you go away and revise these further. So, point number 1. The Nazis were in a really strong position to take over Germany in the early 1930s, partly because they had a really strong organization, and the party was extremely loyal to Adolf Hitler, their leader. This created the kind of environment, the kind of organization which was going to be able to take advantage of the situation that Germany found itself in. Hitler is a very charismatic person, a charismatic speaker in particular. When he gives speeches, it really appeals to many different types of people. And Germans all across the country, from all different kinds of classes and groups, many people start to see this guy as a kind of savior, a kind of person that can help Germany to regain some of its past glory. Combined with Hitler's leadership, we have a group of leaders who are either very smart, they're fanatical, or they're cold-blooded. All of these things are a really good combination for taking power. We have the intelligence, we have this devotion, fanaticism towards Hitler and towards ideas of what Germany should look like, and then we have some people who are cold-blooded, happy to do whatever it takes to take power and keep control. So some of these important people that you need to just make sure you can talk about are Goebbels. He was, of course, in charge of propaganda, an extremely intelligent person who was able to bring some pretty smart ideas to propaganda. We have Ernst Röhm, who was the head of the SA, a fighter, someone who wanted to get out on the streets, wanted to get involved in perhaps a more violent way of taking over power. Goering, who becomes the second in command of the Nazi Party, and finally Himmler, who becomes head of the SS and head of the whole, what we might describe as the machinery of terror, a man who once said something like, "We don't need people to love us, just to fear us." So we have this strong party, we have a charismatic leader, someone that people kind of follow blindly, extremely loyal, and we have a bunch of people who are there ready to take advantage of the problems which Germany finds itself in. Now, the Nazis developed what we call an ideology. This is our second point here. Their ideology basically means their main ideas, the kind of things they said to people in speeches and propaganda to get German people to vote for them. So as it says here, their ideology was simple, it took on popular ideas, and was attractive to many different groups of German people in the troubled years of 1930 to 1933. So let's just look at a couple of examples. If we're thinking about it being attractive to different groups of people, well, we could think, for example, the Nazis talk about getting rid of communism. This is probably the number one fear of rich people in Germany. They are worried about communism, a takeover from communists following what had happened quite recently in Russia. So when the Nazis say they will destroy communism, they get a lot of support from business people, from rich people. On the complete other end of the societal spectrum, the Nazis appeal to poorer people with messages about bread and work. They say they are the party that will protect poorer people, that will help them to do and get the things that they want to do, to work, have enough food for themselves and their family. So they promise these things, two very different things, which appeal to two very different groups of people. And then they have some just very simple but very popular ideas. A great example of this is they promise to break the Treaty of Versailles. You'll remember this is what Germany was forced to sign after World War One, and it was seen as a real embarrassment, a real shame on the country. It involved having to weaken the army, get rid of air force, all this kind of stuff, lose land. And the Nazis said they would break the Treaty of Versailles. So all these kind of ideas are appealing to German people and gets the Nazis a bunch of support. This is going to help them eventually take control over Germany. Having said all of those things, the Nazis would never have been able to get into power were it not for the troubles which Germany found itself in around 1929 onwards. This is the time of huge economic crash across the world, and there's a spiraling problem of unemployment, of poverty, of inflation, and Germans become desperate. Here we see a large queue of unemployed people, and we see in the background some graffiti. We can see Hitler and the swastika, and a message and an idea that it's only Hitler that can help save the country, that can save these desperate people. So faced with the high unemployment, there's around 6 million people unemployed in 1933. Faced with that high unemployment and economic depression, the German people turned to more extreme parties in the elections. In good times, people normally just vote for the normal parties. When times are really tough, they turn to more extreme options. So the Nazis, with their simple promises, with their new vision, with something a bit different, get a lot of support. And really importantly, the Nazis are the most voted for party. So they're more popular than any other party. And this shows us that the Nazis don't come into power through a whole bunch of violence or kind of a rebellious takeover. They are being voted for by huge amounts of German people. Following their success in elections, Hitler is then chosen to be Chancellor and approved in that position by President Hindenburg. So they can get all the support they want of the German people, but without that approval of powerful leaders in Germany, again, Hitler and the Nazis wouldn't have been able to take over power and control so easily. So, an important point here, this is all completely legal. Hitler is chosen by powerful leaders in Germany and put in a position of extreme power, this position of Chancellor. At this stage, though, they're still not in any kind of sense in control of the country. An important event happens the next month, February 1933. This is, of course, the Reichstag Fire. The main parliament building in Berlin, the capital of Germany, is set on fire on February 27th. And the Nazis use this fire to introduce new emergency laws, known as the Reichstag Fire Decree. Whatever we think might have happened on the night or didn't happen on the night, the more important thought for us is how do the Nazis use and exploit this event? So, out of the chaos, the fear, the confusion of this fire, which is seen as an attack on Germany, the Nazis immediately introduce new laws the next day after the fire. And these new laws allow them to do a whole bunch of things. Most significantly, it allows them to effectively remove their biggest opposition, the communists. So the communists are the ones that are blamed for this fire. And that means that communist newspapers are banned, communist meetings are banned, a load of their leaders are arrested, and this really weakens one of the main groups that oppose the Nazis and can kind of stand in their way. Another important consequence of the Reichstag fire is that Hitler is kind of able to portray himself as the only person who can save Germany. He says, look, our country is in crisis. We're about to be taken over by communists. It's about to descend into war and chaos. I can save us. But he says, I need more powers. And so these Reichstag Fire decrees, which get passed very easily through the parliament, approved by President Hindenburg, these new powers give the Nazis control over things that they otherwise would never have been able to do. They can now deny people their rights when they're arrested. They can start to get rid of freedom of speech. They can take power away from local governments. They can introduce harsh punishments for crimes, for example, the death penalty. So all of these things are linked to this one important event, the Reichstag Fire. Using this Reichstag Fire, using the increased sense of fear in Germany and this increased sense that they need to change how the country is being run, the Nazis are able to pass the Enabling Act on the 24th of March. They need other parties to support them to pass this law, and many do. Many, you could say, are intimidated by the SA and are scared, but that doesn't get around the fact that Nazis would not be able to pass this law just by themselves. They have to have support from other political parties. So again, this is all legal. The Enabling Act is relatively complicated in some senses, lots of detail in the writing of it, but essentially, basically this law, this act, just makes it legal for Hitler to pass any law he wants without the approval of the Reichstag, which is the parliament in Germany. So now Hitler is able to pass new laws, and these do not have to be voted for by politicians in the Reichstag. And this opens up the possibilities for Hitler and the Nazis to pass a huge amount of legislation, new laws, which are going to help them increase their control over the country. That's in March 1933. And in the subsequent months, the Nazis rapidly strengthened their power. Some of this is through passing new laws, and these new laws allow the Nazis to control who is in positions of power. So, for example, they passed the Civil Service Act. This means that they can control who can become civil servants. Those jobs include teachers, professors, other important roles in society. They are able to ban other political parties. That is another law that the Nazis bring in, so that no other political party can exist. At the same time, they're increasing their use of fear, principally at this stage through the SA, which is their kind of street private army. And in this time, between March and October 1933, the Nazis are beating people up, they are murdering people, and they're arresting around 100,000 people. And all of this creates a bit of a culture of fear where people are scared to stand in the way of this rapid rise and controlled grip of power. Alongside all of this, they are either removing or weakening any kind of opposition. So as well as banning other political parties, trade unions are banned. There are anti-Semitic boycotts to weaken the Jewish population of Germany. They create concentration camps where they start to send arrested people. So all of these things are helping them to build and grow, strengthen that control. And we are getting basically pretty close, if not already there, to a dictatorship. There aren't really any other political parties. Hitler can pretty much pass whatever laws he wants, and people are pretty scared to stand up against the Nazis. And all of those things are done very quickly and efficiently in this short space of time between January and July 1933. There are still some important things in the way of total power, of complete dictatorship. And those things take a little longer to either control or to pass, or as the final thing of President Hindenburg's death, the Nazis can't really control that. They had to kind of wait for it to happen. But between July 1933 and August 1934, the remaining barriers to total power are removed. Firstly, we see how the people's courts are established. So now this is a kind of separate court and legal system where the Nazis can arrest and prosecute whoever they want. send people away to concentration camps for what they call political crimes. They also see the Night of the Long Knives in this era. This destroys the internal opposition in the Nazi Party and weakens the threat of the SA. That Night of the Long Knives is a really important moment where Hitler strengthens his control over his own party and also, remember, gives his loyalty to, or shows his loyalty to the German army. So not only the German people scared of the Nazis, but now people within the Nazi party are scared of what might happen if they ever dare to question the leadership. And then we have this one final remaining barrier, which is that there is still a president. There is someone above Hitler who, at least in theory, can take power away from him, can change governments, can change the laws. That man, Hindenburg, is old at this stage. He is anti-communist. He doesn't particularly like Hitler and the Nazis, but he also knows that trying to stop them will be difficult and disruptive. And anyway, as an old man, his health is going down. And in August 1934, President Hindenburg dies. That, we could say, is the final moment of any opposition or meaningful ways of stopping Hitler and the Nazi Party. When Hindenburg dies, Hitler makes a new order. He says that the roles of Chancellor and President will be merged, that means kind of put together, and Hitler will become the one leader, or Führer, as the German word is. And so in August 1934, the Nazis have established their dictatorship and can then go on to increase that control and change Germany towards the vision they have for it. So here are a few questions to think about, some kind of ideas that might come up in a question in this exam. To what extent do you believe that the creation of a Nazi dictatorship was done in legal ways? So how legal or how illegal were the methods and the moments that led the Nazis to create a dictatorship? Secondly, how far do you agree that the Enabling Act was the most important factor in the Nazis' establishment of a dictatorship? That's an example of a kind of exam question that might come up. Enabling Act could be replaced there with Reichstag Fire or anything else. And then here's a statement for you to consider. Without the use of fear and violence, the Nazis would never have been able to create a dictatorship. How far do you agree with this statement?